Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is for those people who have their natal Chiron in the 7th house or in Libra, or in rare cases probably have Chiron and Libra in the 7th house, and that would be a double whammy. So the 7th house in astrology is ruled by Libra. That's the connection there. And therefore, it's connected to Venus, and Venus is the goddess of love and beauty. And this is how people express themselves within a one-on-one relationship. So the typical focus is on marriage. This is the area of, committed relationships. So marriage is certainly up there. But some people don't get married, and they still have the same type of dynamic that a couple who is married has. They still have the same level of relationship, in other words. There are also business relationships, partnerships in business. If you have your own business and you have clients, your relationship, one-on-one relationship, and I would say especially if you have some kind of a healing business, like let's say you're a therapist, a psychologist, and you see patients. Well, you wouldn't call them patients, but clients. You would see them in your office, and you have a one-on-one relationship with each and every one of them that may be different depending on the individual. So in this particular reading or video, I'm going to keep it talking about committed romantic partnerships, because the information that I got online from jessicadavidson.co.uk, and I got a little thing from astrologyk.com. Both of these sites were focusing on that type of relationship. So Chiron is a wounded healer and an asteroid that when you look at your chart and you see where Chiron is in the houses, it can tell you the area that there is an unhealed wound in this particular sector. And also you should look at the sign, because that will give more depth to it. You can't just focus on one versus the other. So one thing that Astrology K mentioned is about seeing the parents, this person seeing their parents interacting in a negative way with one another. I wouldn't, on Jessica Davidson's site, she didn't mention divorce or anything like that, or the person's parents and how they got along or didn't get along is really more like it. But I really resonate with that concept. It might not be true 100% of the time, but I think it'll be true more often than not, because this is where everything gets kind of solidified in childhood. This idea of how do men and women get along. Now, same-sex relationships can still do the same thing. I'm saying men and women because I'm talking about fathers and mothers. And some of you who have this placement may not have had one of your parents, so you may not have had them, you may not have even seen them interacting. But even if they're not living in the same dwelling, they may still be interacting indirectly, even if they don't talk to each other. For instance, if you come from divorce, or even if your parents never got married and you never have even dealt with them being in the same room together, you still may have had the pain of having to listen to one tear down the other. And for anybody who's ever experienced that situation, you know how painful it is because you feel that you are being put in the middle. And you know what I mean? So there's divided loyalties there. And really, a parent who does that is doing something really bad, very destructive because of their own pain. So, what Jessica Davidson mentioned, and by the way, all of this that I'm saying is I'm paraphrasing this. So, you can go to the horse's mouth to see how she puts it. So, in case I distorted something, but she sees some relationship as a trauma. I forgot the word that she used. She calls it as wounding, which colors subsequent relationships. That's her term. I said it's experienced as trauma, and this puts the person off to future unions. Wounding, trauma, are they the same? Is one more intense than the other? I don't know. But I think that trauma doesn't have to be something that it's like almost life or death. Trauma can be, something that is more subtle, that is happening on a daily basis, and just continuing to inject pain in somebody's life. So I do think that they can be synonymous, wounding and trauma. So, yes, definitely negative relationships between the parents, as well as even like this is one thing that I think is an interesting aspect to it. Now that I am engaging this at a deeper level, Libra is a sign. Libra is the ruler of this house, and Libra wants to give the impression that everything is harmonious, even if it isn't. So there can be some fakeness, some inauthenticity going on when it comes to relationships. So if you saw your parents fight like cats and dogs, and then they walked into a party and they were lovey-dovey and things like that, that kind of, what would you call that? That shift from one state to another. When they were at each other's throats, that was them being authentic. And yet the child internalizes this idea that, negative emotions, strong emotions are unacceptable. So you have to hide those. And then they grow up to do the same thing. And, if you are in a relationship with someone, you may be very defensive about certain touchy subjects, and you don't want to deal with your pain, and that can really wreak havoc on a relationship, because sometimes people are very emotionally isolated because they are so easily triggered, and they are trying to suppress everything so much that it's like a powder keg. And so you have to warm up to the idea that it's okay to share all of yourself, not just the parts that are agreeable. That sometimes all of us do feel anger and feel sadness. And sometimes we feel that as a result of another person's behavior. And we have the right to these emotions. We should never feel like we are bad or wrong. But if you bottle them up, they're going to still remain there. And the other person is going to sense that that they have to walk on eggshells around you. And that will very likely lead to a deterioration of the relationship, where the other person just doesn't feel comfortable with you because you're just too unhealed. By the way, I'm not saying that this is all going to be what you're dealing with. I'm just saying, some of these things may really ring true for you over others. Um, just the idea of being coupled may form a conflict within yourself versus being alone. And I would say if your sun sign is masculine, so if it's an air or fire, this is more likely to be an issue. But that's not, I shouldn't say that. That's not necessarily true across the board. The reason that I say that is because these signs already have a lot of need for independence. Now, one thing that neither one of those sites that I saw mention, and I think, I've read so much over the years about these placements, I could have sworn that this placement can, in some people's lives, could mean that they have trouble with commitment, or they have a pattern of attracting partners who, you know, cheat on them, refuse to take it to the final level of marriage or moving in together. And so I think that we have to include that because, the seventh house is monogamy. Well, maybe that's not true 100% of the time, but committed relationships to me are one-on-one and not involving other parties. And yet, polyamory might tell me that I'm wrong about that. Polyamory might say, hold my beer. Um, but but in general, so the point is that you may like sabotage relationships with infidelity because of that conflict within yourself about whether or not you really want to settle down forever with this person. And again, to me, it's a self-protective measure because the person, especially if they saw it growing up, if they saw that hostility between their parents and they're like, I don't want this for myself, but they don't know that there is a way to get that. There could be a very strong pull towards relationships as well. That's the thing. If it was kind of like an indifference, that would be no biggie. But there is this pull too. The seventh house is the opposite house from the first house, which is the house of the self. So you can see with this polarity the the two sides of the coin, one being the individual and one being the couple or the one-on-one relationship. And when people, like if people have planets, maybe a stellium in the seventh house, they can be very acclimated to the relationship part of life, but almost, especially if there are afflictions, and Chiron would be that more of a challenging influence, it can lead to codependency, which is building your life around somebody else to the point that you neglect your own needs. And if that person has a lot of dysfunctional behavior, then you're going to be very immersed in their problems. And that's going to occupy a lot of your mental, what do they call that? Mental geography? I don't know. But it's going to occupy a lot of your energy. And so this is Libra, and this area can be the people pleaser, the person who wants other people to approve of them, not be angry at them. Again, I look at the whole chart. If somebody has Chiron in the seventh house and they have Pluto in the fifth house, or Pluto in the first house, or Pluto in the 12th house, whatever, plants in the eighth house, they may have come from trauma, come from very harsh circumstances, or Mars in the fourth house, Mars in the first house, harsh background, and they may have internalized this message that they were somehow wrong. And so in Pisces, if your sun is in Pisces, that kind of thing can make the person feel like they have to appease others. And this can lead also to an overly polite demeanor. Again, these are survival tactics. At the extreme, this was how the person stayed alive or stayed without serious injury. They learned how to read people very well. If there was like some kind of a deranged person that was in their household, like a parent who just was psychotic, and people who beat their children are psychotic. Maybe it comes under the influence of alcohol or other drugs. Maybe it just is part of their extreme dysfunction. I don't know. I don't care. The point is that children become hypervigilant to the change in somebody else's mood, and then they become very it's almost like cowering, where they're like just trying to do anything they can not to set that person off. And so the walking on eggshells, because these are the kinds of people who, if you say the wrong thing on the wrong day, you get beaten, but they'll blame you for it. You should have not mentioned such and such. It's your fault. So, yeah, I mean, that's very tough. That's a very tough situation, obviously. So you have to learn how to navigate relationships in a more self-empowered way, where you're not still feeling like that scared little child. And on another level too, being inauthentic is not fair to that other person, because it's only human nature. If you are agreeable, if you say you like sports, you love sports, you're a sports fan, and you hate sports, and you get with this person who's a sports nut, and then you're pouting because they're always watching sports. And finally, after a while, even people pleasers, believe me, they will show covert hostility. And that's what the overly polite demeanor is all about. It's a cover for that. But people who do that, eventually they let down their guard, and the other person's like, well, that was false advertising. You said you were into this, and now you're trying to change me, and you want me to do something else. So you have to learn how to be authentic and be honest in a relationship about your feelings and your opinions, that you're not trying to mold yourself into what somebody else wants you to be. Your identity becomes too enmeshed with the other. That's part of the codependency. So you cease to have your own life. That person's life is your life. Now, of course, in every marriage or the equivalent, we do have a great, if we're really committed to the relationship, we have great investment and interest in the other person and their life. We're going to support them. We're going to care about what they care about, at least to some degree. We may not have the same passion about it that they do, but we encourage them, even if we don't like it, to find other people who like it, or just to practice it. But when somebody is just completely enmeshed in somebody else's life, they might drop their friends. They might completely become let go of everything that they were interested in as an individual. If your Pluto is in the 7th house as well, be careful. If it's like in conjunction with Chiron, but even if it isn't, if it's in that house, you may attract controlling partners. And they may also encourage you to drop your friends and family and isolate and be like totally, into them to the exclusion of your own life. I put here attraction to wounded birds. the writer talked about these people that have, problems. I forgot how she put it, but I call it the wounded bird syndrome because, and I don't know if I coined that phrase. Maybe I read it somewhere, but I like to call it that because I do think that some people they just make a beeline to people who are very troubled. Maybe they have an addiction. Maybe they have mental illness. And even if it's not diagnosed, there's just this mental imbalance that can show up. Maybe it doesn't show up 100% of the time, but it does show up and it does create complications in that person's life. Maybe they keep getting fired. They can't keep a job. They have a hard time being around other people, whatever. They don't get along with people. And part of this is because Chiron, the wounded healer, is going to be wanting to heal. So that can be part of what is going on, is that they want to heal others and they're looking for people that seem like they are in need. If somebody's confident, if somebody has their life together, that person wouldn't seem like a good project for them because they're already together. So being aware of that tendency that you might have. On the more positive side, you can heal through your relationship. I actually had a client who had this position, and I made the mistake of thinking the negative things, that maybe there was a lack of commitment, but this person actually had a very good relationship. And in that scenario, I could think of somebody who probably found healing through that partnership. And I do believe that, another person can heal you. But the thing about it is that even in those scenarios, you have to want it for yourself at the very least. Or you're already in the process, like you attract somebody while you're already healing yourself. You're in that mode of healing yourself, so that you're really getting into that groove. And like the law of attraction, you're starting to, it's like water seeking its own level. You're starting to attract a higher caliber of relationship. And so that can enhance it. It's not that they're just doing everything. I don't think that anybody can truly heal another person without that person's compliance, allowing it. Alone time can be very healing for you, and this can enhance your creativity, or it could be a creative catalyst. And that's a very interesting thing too, because remember, this is a house that is connected to Venus, so it can have a connection to the arts. So that might be a challenge for some people, especially those who have other things going on. Maybe they have the sun in Libra, or the moon in Libra, or other seventh house placements like the moon in the seventh house. And what about if they have the moon in conjunction with Chiron in the seventh? Then that can make the person like almost ache for a relationship and maybe they feel very lonely when they're single. But you have to battle those tendencies, because it can lead to settling for less. It can lead to codependency, and ultimately it can lead to not healing the very thing that you need to heal. Okay, I hope that this resonated. If you would like a private reading, the link is below. Take care. Bye.